welcome to another episode of All Things Money. I'm your host, Fatima Attarwala. Our conversation today is with Hafiz Pasha, who has been a former finance minister and understands the ins and outs of the country, the economy, the bureaucracy, like few other people right now. One of the main topics that we have conversed with him today is that the austerity measures that the entire country is going through, do they also apply to the inflated bureaucracy? And the answers that you will see within the show would be like, clearly not. Absolutely not. Now, another topic that bears a deep discussion is the recent request by Pakistan's government for a 10 billion swap line from the exchange stabilization fund. Earlier, the same facility was also offered to Argentina for 20 billion amount, for the amount of 20 billion, though Argentina did not draw down entirely on it. Now, what are the strings attached to such a huge amount, and what would that mean for the economy? Could that lead us to a boom-bust cycle again? Would that be the end of the stabilization period, especially as we are about to exit the IMF program next year? Or would that lead to the next crash because Pakistan's reliance on imports continue to increase? For these questions and more, we'll have an in-depth conversation with Hafiz Pasha. Hello, sir. Welcome to the show.
Well, I'm happy to be with you. Go ahead.
So you have been a former finance minister and you've been deeply integrated with the economics and the economy and the workings of the government. So the first thing that we would like to ask you is that we're supposed to be under austerity measures, but there's an article by Shahbaz Rana in the Tribune, and it mentioned that the government is giving a 7% raise to its government employees, which is rupees 1.8 billion, the second time in 4 years. So do you think there is a double standards happening, the way the government employees with all their perks are being treated versus what everything that is happening in the economy right now for the lower middle income groups?
Well, you're absolutely right. You see, the point is that the salary and pension budget of the federal government alone, military and civil combined, is close to $2 trillion, 2,000 billion rupees, I'm sorry.
Rupees, 2 trillion rupees.
2 trillion rupees. And if you include the provincial governments, it's close to 5 trillion rupees. That is a huge cost. That is about 4% of our GDP. And when you consider the fact that this is in relation to what we spend on education, we are spending hardly 1.5% of the GDP on education. So just to keep the government system functioning, we are devoting almost 4% of the GDP. This is too high a number. But what we need to do is to rationalize the federal government, and its structure should have been brought down after the 18th Amendment, when a lot of the functions were decentralized down to the provincial governments. And what should have happened should have been, for example, today you have 42 more ministries and divisions. That number should have come down to maybe 15 or 16. The other huge cost is the so-called autonomous bodies and attached departments. Each one of these bodies should be subjected to what I call zero-based budgeting.
What is zero-based budgeting?
They should be asked to testify as to why they should continue to exist. What is the value of their work and output? I did this about 30 years ago. When I was a minister at that time. And unfortunately, what happened was that when I presented in the cabinet, the 2-3 ministers stood up and said, "Sir, we are going to be without job. So how can we allow this to happen?" So that was the end of the discussion.
So briefly, there was a time when Mohammed Aurangzeb Saab, the finance minister, said it in many occasions that he's also having a similar exercise, and a lot of ministries and auxiliary departments will be let go if they do not contribute. But somewhere along the way, that narrative was lost, and nobody is bringing it up again, even though we're at a very crucial time with everything that's happening with US and Iran.
Absolutely. And in fact, he's probably realized himself the political and bureaucratic constraints to rationalization of government. You see, the key decisions remain with the bureaucracy. And unless there are more ministries and big autonomous bodies, how can you have that many secretaries? Grade 22 to the
What are
government.
the perks of a grade 22 secretary?
Well, the total cost of, if you include mostly the salary plus the free, generally housing and transport and so on and so forth, so on and so forth. I don't know the latest number, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's close to maybe something, if you take particularly the residential accommodation part of it, between 8 to 10 lakh rupees a month.
Oh, wow. And how many secretaries does Pakistan have? Would you have like a really ballpark, federal and provincial?
Well, if you include many of the attached departments who have senior officials and the public sector entities, corporations, and so on, who have salaries at the level of secretaries or more, it runs into hundreds.
Oh, wow. So all of these, they are the ones, our taxes, our petroleum levy, all of it is being financed by us.
Yes, it's all being picked up by tax revenues and non-tax revenues paid by the people of Pakistan. And in fact, we are unable
So
to cover our costs and we are borrowing money also.
we are borrowing money, which brings us to my next point. We have asked the US for $10 billion for their swap line for the exchange stabilization fund. So how do you think that is going to play out?
Well, you see, I have just one or two issues on this. The first issue is that the timing is not proper.
Mhm.
Pakistan has played an outstanding role as a negotiator between Iran and the USA. And in fact, the accord which was signed was called the Islamabad Accord. Now, the point is, at this, if Pakistan grows before things come back finally to normal and takes such a huge amount as exchange stabilization fund, it may create the perceptions that Pakistan is not neutral anymore. And in particular,
Hmm.
Iran may feel very uncomfortable about this. So, my own advice is if you're so desperate for money, wait till the war settles and things come back to normal, and you will have made the contribution to bringing conditions back to normal in the Middle East. Then you can ask for this
Hmm.
kinds of support and subventions.
In the past, the US has said do more. If we take $10 billion, which is bigger than what we have taken from the IMF, what kind of strings would it come with?
Well, it's supposed to be an exchange stabilization fund, so the expectation presumably would be that this would imply that Pakistan would have to stabilize its currency. But the amazing news is the last 3 years, our rupee has been totally stable.
Hmm.
माशाल्लाह 278 रुपीस पे खड़ा हुआ है हमारा ताकतवर रुपया, our macho rupee. So why are we asking for exchange stabilization when our rupee is so stable? In fact, the State Bank says कि इतना stable है कि 7% overvalued है.
Yes, there is a lot of discussion on the real value of it and how it's impacting our exports.
Yes, exactly. So we have artificially stabilized fully our currency. तो जाके हम exchange stabilization fund का पैसा क्यों मांग रहे हैं?
Hmm. But do you think that this is a wise philosophy? Because, there's always been Darrow economics, and whenever there's Ishaq Dar in the background, we've had a stable exchange rate. And this is one of the longest period of stability I've seen. I mean, even if you map the graph, it's just not moving. So do you think it's a wise policy to keep the exchange rate as stable as it is, given that India's rupee has depreciated as well?
Well, the point is that there have been cycles when Pakistan is preferred, and this is usually in tenure more recently of the Muslim League government. If it's 2012-13 to 2017-18 is a classic period of real stability of the rupee.
Mm-hmm.
In 2017-18 or soon after that, Pakistan ran into a financial crisis because the rupee had been overvalued so much that imports had become so cheap that we were importing thousands and thousands of cars and all that. And on the other hand, exports had become completely unprofitable. So, with all due respects, to elected government. This kind of a over obsession with maintaining a nominally, leave alone, I would say, keep it stable in real terms, but not stable in nominal terms. That's far too ambitious. Last 2, 3 years, we have kept it stable in nominal terms, in terms of nominal value at 278 rupees or so per dollar. In real terms, it is appreciated by 7%. It's overvalued by 7%, and it is really badly affecting our exporters.
It's also one of the biggest sectors that is growing right now is the auto sector, and we have 15,000 used cars allowed to be imported. So again, that is fueling the consumption economy rather than the export economy.
Absolutely, because prices have been stabilized, and we have even gone to the extent of reducing the rates of duty on many of these. So what happens is when you maintain an artificially strong exchange rate, your exports plummet and your imports boom, they just explode. And there was a time after 1718 when our current account deficit went up to almost $20 billion. Last year, Allah ka shukr hai, it was almost zero.
But even that is remittances. And a lot of the remittances might be coming right now because people are trying to take out the money from the Gulf states and bring it back to Pakistan where it's a bit safer. So that the perception is it's not productive like exports.
You're absolutely right. Your understanding is excellent. The position is that suddenly out of the blue, the last 2, 3 months, we saw significant upsurge in remittances. And I'm precisely worried about the fact that particularly from Dubai, UAE, people may be coming back. So whatever savings they have, they're bringing back. So this may imply that down the road, we may begin to see a significant plummeting of remittances.
But could there also be a silver lining with the money coming into Pakistan? Would it just be funneled into real estate and we would have a paper economy of the real estate? Or do you think it could lead to more productive activities, more manufacturing, more local trade?
Well, you see, the big Pakistanis who are invested in Dubai and elsewhere in business and other activities, they're not the ones who are going to bring back money. They will find a nice location like Portugal, Singapore, or some place like that. You know that these are popular places for our distinguished people. The people who will bring back money, little money, are the day-to-day workers. So they're unfortunately not in the position to make big investments.
The day-to-day workers are being hurt, really badly hurt by the day-to-day changes in daily fuel prices. Do you think it is wise, even given the uh, volatility of oil prices, but still daily fuel prices, do you think that is wise?
The tragedy is that along with the huge jumping up of petrol prices, we have seen an unprecedented surge in food prices. And you're asking all the right questions. I must compliment you.
Thank you, sir. You're always most
Let
kind.
me tell you what the reasons are. They have nothing, it's only partially linked to the rise in transport costs. Do you know the price of atta, wheat flour, has gone up by over 60%? And why has this happened? This has happened because stupidly, under pressure from the IMF, we withdrew the procurement price regime and the regime of buying from the farmers and building up supplies and stocks. And the end result is that the whole system has collapsed. And can you imagine a situation where people are already paying more for going to work and sending their children to school? And now for the staple, the food diet, the basic item atta has become much more expensive.
But even when PASCO was procuring, there was a wheat crisis every year. It's not only the minimum support price that's the problem. The entire system of procuring wheat, storing wheat, and then saying that entire system is flawed.
It was flawed, but it was much better than the absence of any system. And also, we had managed to cushion the impact through imports of wheat of about 3 to 3.5 million tons. Last year, up till now, there has been no import. So while we are importing cars, we are not importing wheat.
So, but 60% increase in wheat prices is also a lot of room for arbitrage, for hoarding, for black marketing, for profiteering.
Of course, there is, and also there has been another problem, and that is the restriction of movement of wheat across provinces. Punjab produces 70% of the wheat, and yet there are limits to how much wheat is going out of Punjab.
So, if I were to bring you back to an earlier point, you mentioned bureaucracy and how the overinflated bureaucracy. There's a news piece circling right now that there's a South Korean company that has written to the Prime Minister requesting for the $1 billion investment that has seemed to be stuck in hydropower in KP because of the tariff rates. Do you know anything about that? And this is not the first time this has happened. Previously, there was a news circling about a Chinese firm effectively warning other Chinese companies to invest in Pakistan because of the ease of doing business. So, at a time when we are desperately fighting for FDI, we have a South Korean company writing a letter to the Prime Minister saying that we have been here for years trying to invest $1 billion in the country and we're just not being able to move forward.
Well, to give you a real example, this is the case of potential investment. But look at the actual investment flows and how they have been jeopardized. The first big example is Recodic.
Yes.
We have a wonderful agreement agreed and set in place, and it would have been a huge boost in our exports. Gold, gold, gold. And then the other thing was that I've just heard that the Chinese may be thinking out of walking out of Sindak copper.
Oh,
Now, this is very worrying, but security and other reasons for it. So the point is that foreign private investment in Pakistan is becoming increasingly shy for a number of reasons. And one of the new bigger reasons is the risk factor emerging from terrorism and other forms of security breakdown, especially in the part of the country which has the most mineral deposits. And you know that is the province of Balochistan. So the end result will be that Pakistan has begun to see for the last few years, rather than entry of large new investors, exit of big existing investors. Shell Pakistan, Procter and Gamble, and a large number of pharmaceutical firms have all left Pakistan. So this is indeed a tragedy that this is happening, and Pakistan is no longer ever. 10 years ago, it was to some extent. Now it is no longer an attractive location for foreign private investment.
that is one narrative. Clearly, we have investors serially, even allies like China is very dissatisfied with Pakistan. We have, as you mentioned, PNG and other companies pulling out. On the other hand, we have had a stable exchange rate. The S&P Global recently changed our rating from B minus to B, and the government's narrative is always that we have achieved macroeconomic stabilization. So the ground reality and the government's narrative seem to be going in two different directions.
Well, there are the different directions in this, not necessarily. There is a contradiction that there has been an overcommitment to stabilization.
Mm-hmm.
And stabilization inevitably leads to a sacrifice of growth. So, what you really need is a balanced growth strategy. For example, we could have achieved more stabilization while also achieving more growth if we had concentrated, for example, on export growth.
Absolutely.
If we had concentrated on broadening our tax base, increasing our revenues, and supporting development projects of great importance. So, you see, this combination was not right.
Mm-hmm.
Have stabilized, but at a huge cost. Our growth rate is down to hardly 3%, and our population growth rate is 2.5%. And the result is that every year the unemployment rate is increasing, and so is the incidence of poverty. So, time has come to produce a balanced strategy which focuses on continuing stability but opens up doors for somewhat more growth.
And when we talk about growth, we mean balanced growth and not crazy growth when we go to 5, 6, 7%, which is unsustainable and goes towards imports. Now, next year we will be exiting the IMF program, and if the $10 billion from the US materializes, do you think we could severely go into the boom bust cycle that we usually go into?
Well, there is definitely a risk because already Pakistan, in terms of its stabilization, has done well. And at the end of June, we had reserves already of 18.4. Yesterday's figures are that it's come down somewhat to 17.4 due to some repayments, but it's still a good number. And if we were to down the road get the $10 billion, then we will have reserves of $27 billion. Pakistan's history is the classic case of a big family which suddenly, when it gets a big bonus income from somewhere, goes to town on spending. And this is very much Pakistan's story. You look at what happened in 2021 and onwards, our deficit increased to 21, and by 22, 23, we were down to near zero with only $4 billion. So there is always this risk. And it's also to some extent timed with the political developments in the country. So Pakistan has to have a balanced strategy, a sensible strategy, which does focus on continued stabilization, but creates space through appropriate measures, export incentivization, appropriate exchange rate policy, tax-based broadening, investment in infrastructure, so on and so forth, and end up with a growth rate of close to 5% with a stable exchange rate nominally and otherwise.
So you're absolutely right about everything. You're spot on, and you have been spot on about this for decades. But as Mohammad Aurangzeb Saab says, we know what is needs to be done. We just need to do it. So why can't we do it? Why can't we have a smaller bureaucracy? Why can't we have export growth? Why do we continue to work on the same destructive path we have been walking on for the last few decades?
Answer: elite, elite, elite. State capture by the elite.
Do they not have any patriotism? Do they not also want to give something back to the country, given that they're billionaires? I mean,
Well,
these are very, very basic questions where
maybe
it's just,
you
I don't
ask
understand
this
anymore.
question to them that why
If I
is
ask the question to the elite, every elite denies being part of the elite.
okay, then in that case, what we can say is that Pakistan's inequality issue is a very serious one. And you know, we have a situation in Pakistan where the 24% of the economy, with a very large group of huge agricultural owners, farmers owning 400, 500 acres of land. Total contribution to tax revenues, 6 billion rupees. Not 6 trillion, 6 billion rupees. Then the biggest retail outlets, the huge supermarkets, and so on and so forth, making tons of money in the big cities and elsewhere in posh neighborhoods. Total revenue about 60 billion. When Pakistan's budget total is now close to something like, if you include everybody, 15 to 20 trillion rupees. This is the extent of inequality and imbalance in Pakistan.
My last question to you, sir, would be if we were to zoom out, right? We had a ceasefire, we had an MOU, Iran and South US, but now everything seems to have gotten so much more worse. US is headed towards its midterm elections in November. Do you think before that the war will be resolved?
Well, the way things are going, it's beginning to get out of control,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. The escalation is proceeding almost in a completely without any degree of management control or efforts at trying to come back to a ceasefire. We are now seeing the entry of another very big move, and that is the stoppage of Saudi exports from the Red Sea. And already what we have seen in the last 2, 3 days is the crossing of $100 per barrel by Brent crude. And if this process of restricting movement, both in Strait of Hormuz and from the Red Sea, continue, then God forbid, in the next few, literally short term, we will see price may be going up to $120, $130 a barrel, and that will be really oppressive. It will lead to a worldwide recession and make life very, very difficult for all of us in Pakistan. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being on the show, sir. It was a pleasure having you. At the end of our conversation with Hafiz Pasha, one thing is clear. There is a very, very strong elite capture. We've said it before, we've said it in this show, other shows have said it, other analysts have said it, but one of the biggest problems that face Pakistan is elite capture. We know what we need to do. The government knows what needs to be done. But as long as there are vested interests, be they feudal laws, be it agrarian overlords, be it the retail sector, as long as there are vested interests, the bulk of the austerity measures, the bulk of the tax, it will continue to fall on the overburdened middle income, lower middle income groups, which is why the disparity between those who have and those who have not has continued to increase. And it seems that the path that we are on, that disparity will continue to increase. It is true that Pakistan has gone through a macroeconomic stabilization stage. It's true that S&P Global has improved Pakistan's rating from a B- to B. It's true that Pakistan exchange rate has stabilized. But the cost to it, the cost to the average man might be too hard for the economy to continue to bear indefinitely, especially as the war between US and Iran continues to heat up and the oil price crosses $100 per barrel. Can Pakistan continue to stabilize at this rate? Can Pakistan afford to grow? Can the average man continue to feed his family given that the wheat, the basic essential of atta, has increased by 60%? For all these questions and more, I hope that you got the answers you needed from Hafiz Pasha, sir. Thank you for watching.